So, have you guys ever noticed that, like, in the workplace, I'm sure everybody's heard this before, there's off-limit topics of conversation, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. If you're at work, you don't talk about the two things in particular. What are they? Politics and religion, right? You don't talk about politics or religion. It's awkward. It's causes fights, whatever. If you work in my construction company, pretty much the only thing we ever talk about are politics and religion. It's really not politics, but unfortunately, politics are pretty religious, and so if you're talking about one, it's hard to not talk about the other, unfortunately. But I think it's pretty true that there's off-limit topics in the church. That there's things that are so awkward or so maybe difficult or that get us out of our comfort zone that we're like, that's off-limits. We don't talk about that. We're never going to address it. It's too sensitive. I think money's one of those things. Because no one wants to share how much money they do or don't have in their bank account and be held accountable to how they use it, right? That's awkward. That's personal. That's too. You can't get to that part of my life. I separate that from everybody else. That's too personal. I think doubt and suicidal thoughts is another one. That's too. We don't talk about that. It's too hard. It's too difficult. It'll make people think lesser of me. So we almost make it a thing. I think there's one more, and you guys know where I'm going, that is pretty awkward to talk about. It's a really short word, 3 letters, that makes everybody else feel awkward. And that word is sex. Everybody, oh man, here we go, right? Unfortunately, when you preach verse by verse through the Bible talks a lot about it. It talks a lot about sex and how to think about it in a godly way. Right? We as Christians tried to avoid it, though, for some reason. We would never talk about it with other Christians. Too dangerous, right? We don't even talk about it with our spouses. Let's be honest. It's just something you do. It's not something that you talk about and have a theology about. It's a passion, right? Just do it. And another thing is we don't talk to our kids about it. Too awkward, too hard, too difficult. Right? But unfortunately, if we don't learn it somewhere, we will learn it. It's everywhere. I can't even let my children watch Netflix or Disney or whatever unattended or without me having some gauge on it because they're going to learn about sex. Even things that are PG. There's still these double entendres and these things where I have to feel like I have to manage everything that they consume. So if they don't learn what sex is good and godly, if they don't learn it correctly from the church, they're going to learn it from the culture. They're going to learn it from billboards, right? They're going to learn it from television. They're going to learn it from movies. They're going to learn it somewhere. So would you rather the church and godly parents teach it to the kids or let someone else? And hear me out. I don't come in here as some expert. Don't hear me like, I'm the sex expert and you should listen to me. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I am a sexual sinner. I was addicted to porn at the age of 8. It consumed my life up into my marriage, made things really hard and difficult. By God's grace, it's not something I'm struggling with as we speak. I'm not saying it's never something that could slip in and hurt me again. We have to be real about the reality of this is one of the strongest desires that we will ever have. And it will train wreck us if we do not deal with it well. If you don't talk to your kids about it well. If you don't talk about it in your marriage well. Right? It's just so difficult. I think what we as a church need to do is we need to get rid of the stigma that's been built up around sex and deal with it well. Because if we don't, it's going to do what it's already done. It's going to destroy our marriages. It's going to enslave our children. And it's going to consistently degrade the world that we live in, as we can see everywhere we look. Right? Here's some statistics for you, which I think are really sad and hard, and you guys know it's true. 1 out of 4 people, 1 out of 4, have had a sexual relationship outside of their marriage. 1 out of 4. 80% of men either have or are currently watching porn. 50% of women. Which means statistically, I'm talking to somebody right now over half of you that are either currently doing it, whether it be cheating on your spouse or engaged in some sexual sin. It's 100% chance that somebody out there is dealing with this, right? I don't even have to guess. I know it's true because I personally do. And while it's not maybe in my marriage or on my computer, it's in my mind. We have sick minds that you can't even hardly look at a woman without objectifying them to some sexual passion that we have. Am I lying, men in the room? No. It's how we're made. But the truth is, sex is like a ticking time bomb. It's going to go off. You can't stop it. It's going to blow up in your life or in the life of your children or in the culture around us. So we, as the church and as God people, need to become like the bomb squad who can become so good at going in and dealing with the situation that we're able to, with care and with precision, cut the right wire so that it doesn't blow up. And hear me out. Sometimes it'll still blow up. Sometimes you'll still say the wrong thing. Sometimes you'll cut the wrong wire. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Instead, even more so, it means that we need to navigate what it looks like to healthfully talk about these things. And so, and as I said, I don't stand up here today as some expert telling you how you should think about it because I do it so right. I don't. I'm not like, it's something that has plagued my life. And so rather, this is more of somebody who's been damaged saying, I've had to put the pieces together a few times. The bomb has blown up a time or two in my life. So let's figure out together how to put the pieces together. And if you're in here today, there's some people who are still trying to put the pieces together. You're in here today and the bomb has gone off, whether it be through infidelity in a marriage or relationship, or whether it be breaking trust between a husband and wife because of porn, or whatever it may be. There's a reality that you're probably putting the pieces together at some level in here today. I want you to know that this isn't a sermon to make you feel shame. This isn't a sermon to be like, oh, look how bad you are. We all are failures at this. So rather, we come together hand in hand and say, how do we be God's people and navigate this dangerous ticking time bomb? So that's the context of today. So hang with me. We're going to have some hard conversations about some things. I might say some things that step on some toes. And I'm saying them because they step on my toes. And so please stand with me as we read the text for the day. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. So, as we do every week, where does this text fit into the greater scheme of Scripture? Right? Let's do some context and structure work. Right? If you remember, in verse 21, he says that, it won't be up on the screen, that we, in order to be in the kingdom of God, must have a righteousness that is greater than the Pharisees. Right? And the Pharisees had it all together. They had Scripture memorized. They were able to uphold the law nearly perfectly. It says, in order to be in God's kingdom, you've got to be better than that. And I'm like, I'm not. So what do we do? And Jesus is now going on, what does this righteousness that look like? What is this true righteousness that's not just outward action, but it's inward change? That's inward transformation of the heart on the basis of who Jesus is. That actually we can live out what true life is supposed to be. That God had an intention for life in the garden, and that he has come to reign that kingdom back in, give us right standing before God, and we can live out true kingdom life. Right? And if you remember what the Pharisees had done is they had essentially hedged the law, saying as long as you don't get there, or you don't do as long as your actions are okay, you're good to go. But what Jesus is getting at is sin actually isn't an issue of action. It's an issue of the heart. That long before you do something, you've already sinned. You've already made a decision and you're going to act upon it. That right, I've used this joke as an example. If I was going to walk back and punch Nate in the face, I don't just randomly do that. I had to make a lot of mental decisions to get there. Right? I had to first cultivate anger or whatever toward him, and then I had to make a decision that I was going to do it. All that happened long before I made the decision to punch him. Right? And in the same way, what was the original sin? It was eating of the fruit. Right? No. I love this quote that I came across this week. A guy said, in the garden, Adam and Eve didn't choose the wrong fruit. They chose the wrong God. They chose the God of desire. They chose the God of their own flesh. They chose themselves to be the God of their lives. And that's what train wrecked the whole thing. Sexual sin and anger, all the ones that Jesus are going to go through, at their root are choosing the wrong God. Right? This is what has happened. Is culture says sex is God. So as long as you can get this, physical fulfillment, then you can be happy. Well, the church, instead of dealing with it well, instead of saying, no, it's not God, but it's something, what the church has done is they said, church isn't God, but church is gross. So it's something you don't talk about. It's something you don't deal with. It's yucky, right? And so you just don't avoid it all. But Jesus here is saying it's neither of those things. It's not God. It's not gross. Instead, it's a gift. A beautiful, holy, sacred gift that is given in order to be used for the glorification of God. And so, man, let's get into the structure here. He says, because honestly, this is in Greek a really hard phrase to work through because it can be interpreted two different ways. And really throughout church history, people debate it. They're both truths based on Scripture. So we're going to work through both of them as truths. So essentially what we're going to do today is say this is one interpretation. This is the good biblical basis of it. This is the other interpretation and the biblical basis of it. I lean toward the first and want to spend a little bit more time there. It says, really, if you were to break down the Greek word by word, it would say, anyone who looks at a woman cultivating lust in his heart has already committed adultery, right? The word look doesn't mean glance. It doesn't mean you just noticed. Instead, what it means is that it's the ongoing tense, that you continued to look. That maybe a better translation would be stare. But stare doesn't quite do it value because you can look and look away and continue to stare in this term. Right? It means that you've captured it in your mind. That you've taken grasp of it. You've looked and you've desired and you took. Anybody hear that language before? Back to the garden, right? She saw that it was good to eat. She desired the knowledge that it brought, so she took. Right? You see the parallels here going on with the garden. In the same way, that's what lust is. You look, you desire, and maybe you don't go and grab them and take them, but you take them in your mind. Let's be honest about it. Let's not lie. And women do it too. Don't act like you don't. Right? And so it's this idea that if you're not staring, you're still pondering. And it's this ties us back to Genesis. And it's just this broken image of we think we own something that's not ours. When you lust over a person who's not your spouse, you're taking something that hasn't been gifted to you, even mentally. It's not something that you get to enjoy that way. But sex is a gift to be given, and that we don't get to just take it. This is God's good gifting of something. And so it's wrong for us to feel like we can take what isn't ours. Right? And so it's just, I don't know. I want to be careful with my words here because it's a ticking time bomb. If I just go cutting the wires blindly, it's going to be a problem. So I want to make sure that I kind of cover my words well. But the second interpretation of this that people have said is actually, pretty arguably the right one is that, let me find it here. It says that they looked in order to cultivate lust in her heart. So like you don't know who the looking is directed to. So it's either you're looking at her in order to lust against her, or you're looking at her in order to get her to lust you. And either one could be the right interpretation. And so here's, without going into way too much detail, here's two truths of the text. One, having sex or fantasizing your mind is sinful and outside of God's plan for relationships. Right? We are supposed to be, it's what God's design for marriage is one man and one woman. And in that relationship, sex is to be a gift. Outside of that, sinful. Number two, inciting lust isn't helpful either. So again, inciting lust isn't helpful or honoring to God either. Right? This is kind of the joke I said, but like gray sweatpants season is sinful. You guys ever heard that terminology before? That essentially there's this thing out there where women lust over men wearing gray sweatpants. Stupid. It's just a dumb thing. But like, so don't wear those anymore. No, that's just stupid. But let's be honest, girls in the room. Fashion trends become popular because they're sexy. Like it wouldn't become popular if men weren't attracted to it. I don't want to go too far with that, but like as godly women in the room, like most men aren't, girls aren't like, man, he's dressing so hot, I'm lusting after him. But typically it's more women dress a certain way and guys desire it. The godly girl should be humble in the way they dress. And I don't want to take that too far because the first one says it's not on the woman, it's on you. Make sure that's clear. No one makes you sin. That sin is already there. No matter how someone dresses, you should not take part in it. So many times culture says, well, it's her fault. She wouldn't have dressed like that. I wouldn't have acted that way. Wrong answer. Bad theology. You're wrong about who God is. You sinned because you had a sinful desire and acted upon it. I'll be clear. No girl ever asked to be raped. No girl ever asked to be raped. Christian girls, don't dress in order to make your brother stumble. They can be simultaneous without being dangerous. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. Is that we should, like, that's the idea, is the kingdom. So we can care for each other well. That men and women can have honoring relationships with each other, not view each other as objects. But we can actually, like, I can have a good, healthy relationship with a woman who's not my wife. Right? That we shouldn't be hanging out together alone. That doesn't mean we can't be friendly and honoring and like build into that relationship without them being an object of my sexual desire. And so I'll stop before I get myself in any more trouble. Do you remember we talked about this last week, the rule of the equal opposite? So meaning the intention of the law was the opposite truth of that law. For example, with anger, it says you should not murder. Well, what is murder? Murder is taking somebody's life. Right? So how do you break that law? By not being life-giving. Right? So the opposite, if the sin is to take life, the equal opposite would be we need to give life. And if we're not acting in a heart posture to give life, we're in the wrong. We're damaging the kingdom around us. So what is adultery? Right? This is tough because I don't know that we necessarily have a definition of that word. When you think of that word, I just think of like maybe sex in general. Like what is adultery? But here's a good biblical definition that I came to this week, which is adultery is the breaking of a marriage covenant through the means of having sex outside of that covenant. So that's the particular way that Jesus is using the word adultery in this, right? Because he's speaking to people that have a misconception of what adultery is. So he's saying, the only thing that you think lust is having sex outside the marriage, you're wrong. Because a lot of people can almost make that happen. I just won't have sex with other people, but I'll watch porn. But I'll think about having sex with other people. So as long as I don't do that thing, it's not bad. That's not true. We have sick hearts. So if you are thinking and presented with a wrong situation, men, you'd probably do it. Let's just be honest. If you're in the wrong place, the wrong time, you cheat on your spouse. We are broken and sinful people. So rather than that, what we do is we say, what is the opposite of adultery? Which would be faithfulness through and through. That you are faithful to the letter. Right? That how is adultery combated is through faithfulness at the deepest level. Right? If it's breaking of the marriage covenant, it's you do everything you can to keep it. Through the way you think, through the way you act, through everything you do, you're doing all that you can to keep that covenant. And so you might be like, well, what does that mean for non-married people, right? Does that mean you can just sleep around, do whatever you'd like, that it doesn't have anything to do with you, that this is just a command for married people? When doing my research, I heard a lot of people that said that. Well, actually, this isn't pertaining to non-married people. It's only pertaining to married people. No. That is not true. That is not true at all. Right? This verse applies to you too, right? If you are lusting in your heart or you're having sex outside of marriage, right? You're taking something that isn't yours. Right? And because that's true, you're breaking God's intention for sex. You're breaking his designed covenant for what sex is to be. And which means that you should do everything that you should do to be true to what God made a covenant sexual relationship to be, which means you don't have sex until you're married. It seems extreme in this culture. It seems like a wild thing today, but here's the beauty of it. Every man, every woman sitting in this room is worthy of the highest praise because they're made in the image of God. They're worthy of the highest honor, of the highest protection of their purity, because of the way that God views them. Not because of what they've done. That'd be true of anybody, no matter what they've done, is that they are worthy of the highest honor and highest protection of their purity. Right? And because that's true, they are not ours to take. And with right hearts, if you come up to an altar and you enter into a covenant of marriage, you are free to have sex as you please. It's a good and godly thing to be enjoyed, but nothing outside of that. Right? Single men. Until she is married, she is someone's bride. She's the bride of Christ. Which means you should treat her with that sort of honor. Think about that. How does that change the reality of how you treat women? If you look at her and say, she's not my bride, she's Christ's bride. And I'm going to love her as if that's true. In the same way that I'm like my best friend's wives. Like I wouldn't do anything to step on their toes. Because I love them. In the same way Jesus has given me full life. Why in the world would I damage his bride? It makes no sense. But instead we take them as ours. When you put it in that perspective, doesn't it make it a little bit gross? That we would just spit in the face of Jesus that way? That we looked upon his wife and saw them as nothing but an object of my sexual desire? That's something I could stand up here and preach about all day. Like that is... Women in here today, you are honored. You are loved. Men in here, same thing to you. Let us treat each other that way. And so, Jesus knows we're sinful, and he knows we're going to fail. And by his grace, he tells us what to do when we do fail. And look at his response. Wild response, right? What do you do when you fail sexually? He says, rip out your eyes and cut off your hands. Right? If we were to take this seriously, we're going to come in next week and nobody's going to have eyes, nobody's going to have hands. We're going to be wandering around here trying to find a pew. Right? The reality is we would all be blind and worthless because we all fail in this area. So, and it's kind of funny. If you look at church history, I've been doing a lot of studying on church history lately because of the study we're getting ready to do. People took this seriously. Like there was a lot of the martyrs of the Christian faith who didn't have eyes because they were like, well, I'm struggling, so here we go, cut this thing out. Right? The idea is he isn't so much talking about literalness here. He's not talking about being literal, he's talking about being serious. That we should be so serious about honoring God's people that we would be willing to cut our eyes out, be willing to cut our hands off. I think of how those are the most convenient things in life, right? Having eyes and having hands. Nothing gets more convenient than that. Right? Think about how inconvenient life is if you don't have those things. right? You can't drive. You can't do anything that you were going to do with either of those things. And so the reality is our eyes and our hands are dangerous things. And we should be willing to cut off the things that those indulge, as convenient as they are, in order to be holy. What are some of the most convenient things in our life? Television, cell phones, going to a gym. Those are great conveniences that we have. Would you be willing to cut it out for the sake of holiness and honor of your wife? Would you be willing to throw your phone away? Most of us, that's crazy. Would you be willing to smash your phone on the basis of sexual purity? Most of us are like, I can't do that. That's too inconvenient. More inconvenient than cutting your eye out? Like, come on now. That's wild, right? And think about, this goes a level deeper, is I think he uses eyes and hands on purpose. The eyes are, what are you looking at? Just be honest, Christian. What are you looking at? What's the television you're watching? What's the social media you're scrolling on? Even in real life, where do your eyes go when you're in Walmart? Like, maybe you should start doing online pickup. Like, honestly, that sounds crazy, but like, I'm not joking. Like, we should be extremists when it comes to upholding the honor and purity of women and the honor and purity of our marriages and ourselves as well. And then hands, what are you doing? I've got to be careful with that statement. Sorry, too far. But literally, where are the places that you're going? Maybe you shouldn't go to those places anymore because you can't do it unsinfully. And there will be times that God maybe will heal you in ways and you can bring those things back in over a period of time. Maybe not. Maybe you can never have full access to your cell phone again, and that's okay because it's better to be without these things than it is to be with them in hell. Strong language there. Do you believe that's true in here today, Christian? I don't all the time. I wish I did. I still watch movies I shouldn't watch. I still probably have social media that I shouldn't have and still think in ways that I shouldn't think. But Jesus wants us to take this seriously, right? And the one maybe elephant in the room that I haven't touched on is same-sex attraction. That we are so often to jump to a conclusion. That's right. I've made the jokes about men and women, and it almost seems okay to cheat on your wife. People, it's almost okay to have sex outside of marriage, but it's really gross to be gay. I don't believe that at all. I don't. You know what's gross is when you take the marriage covenant of God and throw it in the trash for anything. That's what's gross. Whether it be same-sex attraction, whether it be cheating on your wife, whether it be watching porn, what you're taking is God's good and great design for sex and saying, worthless to me. Right? That's what's gross. Not necessarily how you're doing it. Being gay isn't, in my opinion, even as gross as cheating on your wife. There's a lot more going on there. And like I said, the Bible makes them equally despicable in the eyes of God because it throws away his beautiful design for what marriage and sex is to be. So this is exhausting. I don't want to preach this sermon, just being completely honest. Like, this is a tough, I'm like, ugh. So I can work a 16-hour shift in construction and then come up here and preach a 30-minute sermon, and I'm like, man, I'm way more exhausted. But the reality is this can make us feel a lot of shame. This can make us feel a lot of guilt. But hear this today. Despite our unfaithfulness, Jesus is faithful. Despite how you messed up this week, Jesus will never mess up like that toward you. He will never lose you. He will never forsake you. He will never drop his high honor and love of his people. Right? Maybe your faith hasn't been, or maybe your spouse hasn't been faithful. You have a spouse who is perfectly faithful. We are all the bride of Christ for those who are in Jesus, and he will never lose us. So what's the cure? What's the cure to lust? And I think the cure is contentment. Contentment in Christ, right? It's knowing that he has and what he's given me is enough, right? You're content with your own wife. Men, what does it look like for you to cultivate that? Cultivate a sexual desire for your wife. That's awkward. maybe you've been married for years and years and years, and that's just something you don't do anymore because it's, I don't know, maybe you've lost attraction for each other. The only person you're allowed to be attracted to is your wife. Cultivate an attraction for that. That's good and godly. Single men, you should be content that God hasn't given you one yet. Be the man that God could give his daughter to right now. You should be the type of man that God would say, here's a woman for you. Until then, continue to grow in that reality. What does it look to be that type of man? And if he never gives it to you, can you be content then also? It doesn't promise that. We as the church need to break the stigma around having good, healthy conversations about sex so that we can push back against the world that calls it God and show that they have a greater God who wants to give them true life in the person of Jesus Christ. Join me in prayer.